And welcome to Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres, episode 302. Today, it's a feedback session, and we've got 3 different photos with 3 different questions and 3 very different responses. This is what we're going to be looking at today. So stick around. If you happen to be watching live, then leave a comment. Let me know what you're up to. If you're watching the recorded version and you're more than a couple of hours after it's finished, then down below I will have a time-stamped menu so you can leap to the bit that you're most interested in. Meanwhile, try and find the right bit of technical bit. I'll go with that one. You know, I have all these ideas for slick, smooth starts where I look like a complete professional. Now, anybody who's joining in the recorded version is going to take a look at this and go, wasn't for me, and leave, I think. Anyway, here we are, live on YouTube. If you happen to be watching live, well, you probably are, because if you watch the recorded version and you're watching my intros, you probably clicked away by now. Anyway, if you happen to be watching live, then leave a comment. Let me know you're here. If you like somebody messing up the beginnings, then you can also click like. Like always helps the algorithms too, even if you're watching the recorded version. So today is a feedback session. Anton, Gunilla and Roland have all sent in images. 3 very different images, 3 different sets of questions and 3 very different responses. So there's going to be quite a lot of, I think, really as much on the kind of philosophical in-depth side to this as anything else, really. Yeah, stick around for that. I see we've got people in already. Oh, Fiji joins us. Welcome back, Fiji. Missed you last week. Says, good evening, friends from Chennai in India. Not too humid. Slowly hot season is coming to a close. That must be a big relief for you. April says, greetings everyone from a mostly cloudy Long Island, New York. Gunilla joins us. Says, hi from Ireland. Very windy again, and the lawn has turned yellow because there's been so little rain. It's getting colder, about 15 degrees Celsius in the middle of the day. John says, hello all, nice day here in mid-Ohio. Just recently returned from a trip to Alaska. Wow, okay, I'll be looking forward to seeing the photos you put in for that. Sandy says, hello from a smoky hot Alberta. Roland says, hi guys, sunny and not too hot in London here. Well, Stacey joins us all from Hatboro, Pennsylvania. Says, good morning all, it's nice and sunny after thunderstorms earlier. Humidity's finally gone. And yeah, April saying nice to John. So yes, there we go. We have people, we have pictures to look at, we have a topic. So and we have a confused host presenter who's sort of feeling slightly out of sorts. A little bit of a side, just because hey, we're friendly, we're all in the room together. What's kind of thrown me is, we've had a little bit of a kind of a mouse invasion here. We live in an old building, terrace building, you know, a couple 100 years old. The odd mouse here is inevitable. We found the kind of area they're most likely to come in first. Little humane trap. Yep, I'm a terrible one. I can't. There's a whole backstory to this, but anyway. So little humane trap, and then I have to we catch them. I have to drive them 2 miles away to drop them off. Apparently, they can find their way back in anything less than 2 miles, which is quite horrifying. And normally we get the odd one every 3 months. In the last, since about 5 o'clock last night, we've had 5 of the little so-and-sos. So late last night before going to bed, up again this morning, and it's like, 2 this morning, in fact, I've had to go. So point of this is, it's just, the whole thing has really thrown me. So anyway, this is just all chat and blether. We talk about weather and bits and pieces. You have major minus problems. Maybe that's something to bring into discussions. Or maybe I should be just setting up the camera and trying a little kind of camera trap somewhere and try and capture them. Whole new bunch of photography to go to. Gord's joined us from Toronto. Welcome, Gord. Glad you could make it along. April says, oh, sorry, Kim. One way or another, we live with it. It's just, I was hoping to be much more focused at the moment. Hopefully that will all come in as we get going. John says Alaska was amazing. I'm sure it was. Like I say, really interested to see what kind of images you start posting. Or don't forget, of course, you can always send any into the feedback session here. If you are ever sending anything, then we have our, email address, kimayorspodcast@gmail.com. That's the place to send any images for feedback, critique, question, or if you have major questions on a philosophical or photography level at any rate, then place to send them. Right, okay, I think the best thing to do is just actually make a start on this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with, no, not that one. Where are we? I seem to have lost my image. There we go. Yes, here we go. I'm going to start with Roland. Now, Roland sent in this photo, and he says, any help with this one would be greatly appreciated, as I think there's a shot here trying to get out. The shot is of a father and a daughter and a three-legged dog. Honestly, I would never have known it had 3 legs if you hadn't said. I mean, we can zoom in, we can see it's got 3 legs, but the nature of silhouettes means it's very easy for one leg to just be hidden slightly behind another. So my attention wasn't drawn to it. Now you mention it, obviously I see it. He said, I'd just been sitting on a bench next to them and they told me of a tragedy that befell them the previous week, which left me very moved. If I bump into them again, I would like to send them a photograph. I think they might find it helpful. The old man on parting squeezed my shoulder in thanks for listening to their story, but said nothing. It's why I love photography. I mean, that's really powerful. Now, interesting thing about photography always is there's the photograph as in, what it looks like objectively, as in to anybody else who wasn't there, who wasn't involved in the conversation, who didn't know any of the backstory. Then there's the photo to you having gone through that experience. And when you take the photo, you experience, so at the point you took this photo and the point you look back at this photo, there's a whole bunch of emotions attached to it. And those emotions aren't necessarily transferred when we look at it. So when I see this photo, I don't know any of that backstory beyond what you've told me. You could have just as easily been walking down the street, seen a man and a woman and a 3-legged dog, nice bit of backlight, shadows, and just gone, oh, that's interesting, click. Now, on that level alone, I think this is a rather lovely photo. Does have to be said. And so, when you say there's a photo waiting to get out, I mean, I think you've kind of already got it. I'm not totally sure what else you might do to this. Now, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk you through a couple of options. But really, I think there's a lot. It's kind of a lovely photo. The only thing I would say really is it could maybe be brightened a bit in places. But what we'll do is let's open this in Photoshop. So we'll pull this into here. And, no, wrong one. That's what I'm trying to do. Is just zoom in a bit. And so what we've got is we've got the picture. Now, 2 things that strike me are, one is the colour. It's a very kind of like unnatural colour. I mean, it does have that. I'm assuming here your white balance, whether your white balance on auto wasn't on auto and was maybe set for something else, and then, so it's got a very yellow shift to it. And where we can tell that is if I go to, a kind of an auto, what shall I do? Yeah, if I pull up colour and vibrance, it's an interesting thing here. You get the little picker and we drag it over here. And if we put the little pipette somewhere where we kind of expect it to be white, so this is going to allow us to give us our white balance. So we maybe place it in the sky up here. Well, that's now suddenly made it very, very blue. And now this looks much more, unlike a kind of, say, a summer's evening, almost looks more like a winter's evening with that kind of, or winter afternoon with that kind of cool blue. Maybe if we click it on that seat, that gives us brings it back a little bit. I mean, that's probably more likely. But you can see that if we click a more kind of yellow space or a green space, it goes purple. If we pick a more purple space, it goes green, and, vice versa. So depending on where we click this, we can really get a kind of colour shift moving around. So you could have something, say, like that. Another thing that I would say is the notion of the brightness or the levels. So if it feels like it's a little bit dark, we can see here in the histogram over on the right that we can immediately move that out. If we move this up to where the action is happening, you see there's this gap. So we can take the slider and we can move it up here, and that means we can brighten it up to about there without blowing any highlights. Having said that, the real action is in the middle. A lot of this big bump over on the right of the histogram is really the sky. So what we could do is we could bring it up to about here and then mask back in. So if I take the brush tool, make sure over here we've got that in black, I can just take the sky back to that and see what happens to the histogram. Now we've lost that chunk of sky. There's one or two very slight little highlights where it's kind of dragging things over, maybe just where it's catching the bench. I could take out a couple of those, little blob over there. Maybe not that bit, I quite like that bit. Anyway, so what we can see is we can kind of, don't want to have that bit of the pavement blown too far. So we'll just pull that back until we get the little bit of detail. And that then, if you can see, has allowed us to brighten up the picture somewhat. And we've gone, likewise, even if you're doing it in colour, with the original yellow, it's still the same. So I think that's that helps lift it. Okay, so that I would say is kind of your starting point. I mean, it could even be your end point if you want. Now, other things you could potentially do. Actually, just one sec. I'm just going to slightly tidy up the desktop over here. Forgot to do that a little bit earlier. Just drag the chat box and the of YouTube over here so that I can. Oh, where's that going? That's not quite what I wanted to do. Yeah, I don't know, 300 and however many episodes, and it's still not looking like a professional here. That's just not wanting to. Oh, give me the corner. Stop messing about. I can't seem to drag this to where I want it. There we go. Right, okay. Got that back. Having said that, April said, yes, this shot looks very vintage. I like it. Sandra's saying, hello everyone, from a warm and sunny Birmingham. Roland was mentioning the mouse. Right, okay, so where were we? Let me go. Let me go. I really don't know what's up with me. Right, okay, so let's fling back to here. So where were we? Okay, right. So we've got the picture. So having got the levels a bit more comfortable, I mean, there's tiny little bits. There's a funny little bit of light bit here. You could kind of remove that. But now, what else can we do? We can play with the crop. The thing is, there's something quite nicely balanced about it. And I was trying to play around with the crop a little bit earlier with this and wasn't overly making it any better. I mean, you can, if you want, kind of go, turn it this way, make it more, but nah, I quite like the fact that we've got the building. You could maybe lose a little bit of the paving. We still want to keep those shadows in. You could bring the sky down a bit, but I don't like it getting too square. So then what happens is I find I want to start kind of just bringing in. I quite like that the portrait ratio works quite nicely because of our walking, and also you've got the lampposts. And so you've got all these verticals here, and you kind of want to echo that. So you could do something like that, but then I wanted a little bit more of that. But then I feel I've lost a bit over here. I mean, there's a certain level whereby, play with your own aesthetics a little bit. I mean, you could maybe bring in a little bit. So I still even quite like the bins over here. I don't want to crop in too far on the left because I do quite like that bit of the lamppost there as well. But then I kind of end up wanting to move it over a little bit. I mean, again, where you want to crop it, maybe I could do something like that. But I'm not going to do much more than that because anything more than that really loses the space. So I quite like the space on that. So then the only other options we've got here now, well, there's two other options. I'll come to that one in a minute. But the other option here is we either go black and white or we maybe change the colour grading. So what we could do is if I go over to here and I go black and white, and it's that's kind of interesting. But I think if you're going black and white, you then also need to play around with the contrast or even the clarity. So if I take the contrast, you could kind of, maybe we could brighten it up a bit, play with the contrast a little bit. And that sky is becoming a bit too bright again for my taste. What about the clarity? Let's get the clarity. That's kind of more fun, but it's more fun on the beginning. It actually makes the background too sharp in a way. So, I mean, you know, it's not bad. Maybe I might add a little bit of a vignette in there somewhere. But is it really any better? Is it any better than what we had, you know, way back? I'll just actually go back before the crop. Another option is the notion of kind of color grading. If you've got Photoshop, there's a thing called color lookup, which gives you a whole bunch of quick ones to play with. And so you can end up with things like, where are we? This version here, you know, it gives you tension green, which obviously isn't working. That one's not particularly nice. Not sure about that one. Some nighttime ones, late sunset, a bit over stylized. You see that one? This is a Kodak film, and it's a slightly softer one. Again, it's more of a vintage feel to it. Again, if we actually went back to the levels, put that above here, you notice it shifts the histogram, so there aren't any true blacks in that. By lifting up the blacks a bit, it always tends to give it that sort of slightly faded Polaroid or faded photo feel. So you know there are things you can do like that. So you can shift the color, you can color grade it, you can make it black and white, and it does have a kind of vintagey feel to it. But at the same time, if we go back to the absolute original, okay, I think maybe that yellow is a little bit too harsh, but there's still something, even if I brighten that, but there's still something quite nice about the warmth of that yellow. I mean, I can go back to the colour and vibrance bit and possibly just nudge that back over a bit, you know, maybe put that back to 0. I mean, we don't want the full yellow like that, but you know. So ultimately, what it comes down to then, Roland, is what I think you have here is I think you've got a damn good photo. There is just something, it's a lovely, I mean, if I took this photo, I would be delighted with this photo. Like I say, the most you might do is tweaking. You know, we play with the levels, get your levels right, boost it a bit and lift it. Maybe, like I say, you know, make sure the sky doesn't blow out. I'm not sure about that colour lookup. The other option here, which is a different photo to this one, which is when you called it, you said a father, a daughter and a 3-legged dog, right? And in essence, with that, what we have is we have a photo here where we crop in something like this. And then what you have is, you know, where if you to take a photo like this, and then what you're doing is you're kind of emphasizing the point of almost dog's eye point of view, right? So we've got the dog completely in the photo, and then we just have the legs of the two people by the side. And there's something very nice about the way that these people are stepping. You know, the foot has left the ground. It's not joined to the shadow. Likewise, the foot has left the ground on that. And then we can see the 3 legs of the dog. So if you were to call this one something like 7 legs or 7 feet or something like that, to put into a very specific kind of competition, you could. Or you were to call it daughter, father, 3-legged dog, or something, you know, man, woman, 3-legged dog, you know, that kind of thing. And that's a kind of fun photo. But if we're talking about other than kind of just doing that in its own right, you know, I really think you can just kind of go back to here and, you know, it's a beautiful photo. Get your levels right, you know, take out 1 or 2 things like the little bright patch. If you do brighten the levels, maybe, you know, just watch out for the blown highlights on the pavement. If you want to go black and white, go black and white. You can go black and white and maybe a bit more grainy even. Emphasize that sense of kind of nostalgia. But by and large, I would say that's kind of it. So, yeah, thank you for sending that one in, Roland. I mean, I don't know, when you say, you know, like I say, when you say there's a picture waiting to get out, I think you already have the picture. Really, ultimately, all it is tidying it up a little bit to give the kind of best version of what you've got. So maybe a little bit of cropping, maybe a little bit of colour shift, maybe a little bit of levels, but most of it is really there. It is a lovely shot. And certainly if I'd taken that one, I'd have been well chuffed with it, I think. And I think if you did find them, managed to get an email address and sent it to them, I think they'd probably be quite delighted with it too. So thank you for sending that one in. Right, comments then. What else have we got? Oh yeah, Sandra joins us from a warm and sunny Birmingham. Roland said hard to make it fit. That's why we're doing the thing. VG says portrait adds the depth rather than landscape, and that's true. The landscape is better on a slightly flatter kind of image where it's more about the people. This isn't just about the people, it's about the people moving into the distance, and so that distance becomes important. VG also says I kind of like the colour of the warmth of the sun reflecting on the road. Yeah, and again, yes, you know, that how far you want to shift into blue, into the yellow, is changing it from a kind of winter scene to a summer scene. Because there are no trees about, there's no obvious kind of other signs of what the season is. Actually, that colour shift really gives you a sense of whether you decide it's a hotter day or a colder day, or whether it's evening or whether it's afternoon. Well, there's a length of shadow there, so it does feel more like it's, if it was in the winter, late afternoon. If it's in the summer, it would be in the evening. VG's laughing at the idea of calling it 7 feet. Roland says thanks. Marilyn says hello from a hot Colorado. Glad you could join us, Marilyn. Okay, right. So yes, thank you for sending that one in, Roland. It's an interesting one to explore, that idea of the different ways that you can take it. Right, next up then we have Gunilla in Roland, and she says, picture and a question for the critique podcast. So let me just find Gunilla's photo, and what we've got is this one here. And Gunilla says, my question is this. Why do I like my photos first and second time I look at them after I've taken them? But after a while, and several viewings, I don't like them so much. I sent you this picture that I took in June of an event when a choir sang a song at a photo art opening. I still like the picture, mostly because of the backlight and the fact that I didn't cut anyone in half. Of course, there are things to improve, and I'd be grateful if you did speak about what I could have done differently. Okay. So there's kind of two aspects to Gunilla's submission. One is, here's a picture, what might we have done, what might we have done differently? And the second, but it overlaps with a picture like this, which is, why is it that sometimes we have particular photos which we like at the point we take them, we look at them, we go, oh, that's quite good. The second time we look at them, yeah. The third time, fourth time, fifth time, we've lost something. We don't have the same kind of attachment to them. Now, on that question, there's essentially two different aspects. One is almost any photo is going to fade in its significance over time to us. The first time we look at it, it's new. And if you have the brain type that new is exciting, then it's exciting. And continually seeing it all the time, eventually your brain starts filtering it out. You're never going to get that same thrill of the new on the 20th time you've seen it. A lot of my photos, I take the photos, for clients or in a situation, I'm in an event, I take photos and I'm really pleased with the photos. Then I go through, I select the photos I'm happiest with, and then I start editing them. And while I'm editing them, I'm deep diving into, I'm doing all the bits, I'm pushing pixels around the screen. I get really excited by how they're going to look. After a long time, I have seen this picture so often that essentially I get fed up with it. I get to a point whereby when I finished editing it, sometimes I can sit back and go, oh, that looks good. But very, very quickly, I just get, oh, I'm just so glad I've got that finished. And even if I think it is good, again, I've seen these photos so many times. It's very, very difficult to see these photos fresh. The fun part for me is actually then when I sit down with the client and the client sees them for the first time. Then they look fresh. For some of you, you might have this experience of, say, something like Christmas. When you're a child, Christmas is so exciting, or whatever other festival that you've kind of grown up with, or birthdays, similarly. That's so exciting, they're new, there's presents, you're a year older, there's excitement, And then you grow up and the magic is gone, and and then it sort of stops having any kind of real connection to you. But then what happens? Maybe you become a parent, or you become a grandparent even, and you start to see the event through a child's eyes again. And Christmas, in my experience, and I've heard a lot of other people talk like this as an example, is so much more enjoyable when there are children around. So it's a case of, because what it happens is it's allowing you to see it fresh through somebody's eyes. And why do we need that? Because there's only so much we can keep seeing the same thing and still feel excited about it. So there is that. That's part of it. Now, when we come back to your photo like this, I would say there's another aspect to it as well. And part of that is when we do the overlay, which is what could you do to improve the photo? This is a tricky one. I'm not sure how to improve this one, but for different reasons than the fact that I couldn't figure out how to really improve that much on Roland's photo. Roland's photo was already a good photo, interesting light, interesting composition, a sense of depth and story. Now what this is you said it's a choir singing in a park at an event. But actually, do I know this is a choir? No, from the photo, I don't. When I look at this photo, what I see is a group of people standing around. There's a group of people standing around, and they could be just gathered for something that's going on over here. They all seem to be looking off to the left, but I can't see what they're looking at. I can see a woman sitting in a wheelchair. I can see a little mobility scooter over here. Looks like somebody, could be a dog leaping up to somebody. There's like a little bit of action going on here, but that doesn't look like something worth having a whole crowd to look at. And then also there isn't really a clear focal point, right? There's a bunch of people, but there isn't really a sense of where my eye is supposed to go. Like I say, my natural thing is to follow where everybody's looking, but that's leading to a little bit with a dog jumping up behind somebody. That's not enough of a fulfillment, a kind of a place to have so I get, but then we've got this bit of wall down here on the left, coming strong diagonal, coming out of the corner, drawing our eyes to a bunch of legs, a handbag, pink jacket. Pink jacket probably stands out a little bit more in the kind of sea of duller blues and greys and whites. But is that a fulfillment? Not really a fulfillment. And so compositionally, it's not delivering. And story-wise, I don't know that it's a choir. So it's not really. So the problem is here, there isn't anything that I can do in the editing process to emphasize the story, because I don't really know what the story is. You can tell me it's singers, but there isn't anything in here to indicate that it's singers. And so this then comes back to your original question. And it's a really important thing to understand with photography, because it's something so many of us kind of miss, which is when you're standing there, you have this full experience. If this was a choir, then you would have been hearing the singing, right? You're there, there's something interesting you about it. You presumably like the singing. If the singing really horrified you, they were singing all the songs that you hated, you would have left more quickly. We've got the longer shadows. You say there's a backlight coming in. It's a sunny evening in June. There's music. While you're there, at the point this photo is being taken, you've got all the sounds, you've got the smells, you've got the emotional experience. You can feel the sun caressing your skin. It will be a lovely experience, a lovely open evening, and you're there with your camera snapping away, and there's probably a lovely mood and atmosphere to it, lovely green leaves catching the light on the sun, and everything feels good about it. So at the point you take that photo, you have everything beyond the flat two-dimensional surface of a photo. It's not just 3 dimensions. It's not just 4 dimensions through time. It's multi-sensory. Your experience is multi-sensory. When you look at this photo, it is a gateway to the memory. So the first time you look at this photo, you bring it up and you go, oh yeah, I remember that. And all the memories come flooding back. The memories of the sounds and the smells and the feelings and what have you. And the second time you look at it, some of them are coming back, and the third time. But actually, because the photo itself is nothing more than a gateway to the memory, there isn't something visually sustaining about it. We're not drawn into something where we're going, oh, look at the choir master and the angle that they're moving their hands. Look at the full sense of engagement these people have while they're singing. Look at the audience; they're in rapture and attentiveness. And it's these things. What's making a story? Where's the way? The story is either the action of the choir or the action of the person who's directing the choir, or the reactions to the people around it, or it's just really interesting lines and shapes which are kind of drawing you into. And we don't have those things. And so as such, the photo doesn't sustain beyond gateway to the memory. And as such, it makes it even harder for you to then kind of hold on to the sense that it's a good photo, because to begin with, it is a good photo because it's conjuring up all these wonderful feelings. As time goes on, as a photo in itself, it doesn't translate to anything beyond that gateway to the memory. And certainly to anybody else watching it, taking a look at this photo, they don't have those memories. They don't have the gateway to your memories and feelings and everything else. So it doesn't translate. So, on the one hand, it's competent, so anybody else who was there, if you showed this photo to members of the choir, to the person in the wheelchair or the mobility scooter, to the person whose dog was leaping up, they go, oh yeah, I remember that. And it would be a gateway for their memories, and they'd be quite happy with it. But that's about the limit of it. So I think that's really interesting. And I apologize in that I can't do anything for how to improve the photo. But if we're talking kind of about the concepts of it, it's a really interesting idea to explore. What is it about photos that can give it a longer term sustainability? So because there are some photos we can come back to again and again and again and still gain an enjoyment out of it. There's certain photos that satisfy and fulfill when we look at them. And by and large, those photos which are most fulfilling, that are beyond just gateways to the memories, tend to be ones that we've used all these other photographic tools to do. They lead our eye to particular places. They give us a sense of colour, shape, mood, energy, narrative, really. Like I say, beyond the memories. So I hope that helps. And thanks for sending that in, along with that question as well, Gunilla, because I think that kind of really opens up an interesting point for that we all kind of need to try and recall and remember with that. So what have we got here? April says, good question. John says, great question. Meg's joined us and says, hello, everyone. Hi, Meg. Glad you could make it along. VG says, yes, I thought they were spectators watching something too. And Gunilla says, interesting and very true. Right. Okay. So thank you then to Roland and to Gunilla for sending in those images. Quick little reminder, if you find these podcasts useful, interesting, entertaining, if you enjoy a laugh at just the idea of me messing up practically every intro and never fully looking professional, but at the same time, truly appreciating that I'm not an AI, because no AI would ever mess up in the way that I do, then buymeacoffee.com /Ayres is one of the ways you can support these podcasts. Right. The other thing as well is the Substack. Don't forget there's the Ayres photography.substack.com. If you haven't already signed up to that, there's at least once a month at the moment I'm putting out where I give updates on, in case you missed it, what's happening in the podcast, what's coming up in the upcoming months. The newsletter generally goes out near the beginning of the month, but there's also thoughts in there as well, and section, photography stuff I've done, bits of writing which you can skim past if you wish. You don't have to read everything. You don't even have to open them all, but it's there. The point being is that I'm trying to do more of bypassing social media, because social media algorithms are all about really making it restricted. I shove up a post to say, hey, everybody, look, we're going to be doing this. And I get back, showed it to 6 people, right? And you do all the extra, okay, I'll stick a picture in because then I'll maybe get it will get shown to 8 people. I'll leave a comment. Woohoo, I managed to get it shown to 9 people. And it's, it doesn't matter the fact that I might have 1,000 people or 5,000 people following. It doesn't matter. The social media algorithms and platforms are tightening the screws all the time, trying to force you to pay hundreds of pounds in order for your natural followers to be able to see what they've already said they want to see. Having got so frustrated with that, I'm trying to bypass that. The Substack newsletter is a way of making sure I've got a channel now through to people who are genuinely interested and want to carry on following what I'm doing, and be made aware of what's going on. But you're not reliant on whether Facebook or Instagram decide that they're going to, draw the curtains over it. So anyway, that's sign up for the Substack. What have we got? Oh, Robert's joined us. Says, sorry, late. Howdy all from the frying pan known as Texas. 42C. 42C? That's VG in Chennai temperature, that is. Right, okay. Hope your air conditioning's working. Or that you've got a nice pool under a shaded tree just to kind of sit in, and maybe you've employed somebody to just kind of keep wafting you with a fan. Right, where are we? Yes, Smug points. Yes, quick little update on the Smug points. So, August being a 5-week podcast, Smug points are slowly building up. And so far, not including today, it will get adjusted today, Gunilla is sitting on 55 Smug points. Anton is on 40. But Robert, Sandy, Roland and Marcy are all sitting on 30. So, still a lot to play for. Now, Gunilla, Anton and Roland will all get they'll get an extra 25 Smug points for putting something in for today, because when you submit an image for critique, feedback, you get 25 Smug points. And if you're leaving a comment here live today, you get a bonus 5 Smug points. So Roland and Gunilla are now actually with 30 Smug points. However, next week is the car challenge. Don't forget, we had talked about photographing cars last week, Robert's suggestion. So there's Smug points aplenty to be won for the car challenge. So anyway, I will talk a little bit more about that at the end of the podcast. What's that? Oh yeah, Sandra says, hope you've got good aircon, Robert. So now, carrying on with this kind of philosophical theme, I'm now going to move on to Anton. Now, Anton's timetable means that he's not allowed to join us live most of the time, to the advantage of those who can, who get the extra 5 Smug points. But Anton is pretty good at sending us stuff, so he does fair whack up the Smug points sometimes. Now, Anton he sent me various photos, but this was the most recent one, and so I'm basically going to move on and go with this. And Anton sent me this image. And he said, so I got lucky with this one. I went out at night, as I tend to, and shot this on my way home. Fog and mist started to appear, so that makes like half the photo. But then I'm shooting down this road, and a hedgehog decides to cross as well. And if we zoom in here, note the little hedgehog. How cute is that? And he says, so I tried getting the best photographs including the hedgehog, but he's gone in a few seconds. Do you think this crop is right for this shot? Do you think it works with the hedgehog, even though it's such a tiny part of the photo? And now, interestingly, what Anton also did was he sent me several other photos of the same evening of, this is the, this is the raw version, the colour version. Interestingly, you can see the yellow sodium street lights, a little bit of night light in the sky here. Anton's talked before about the fact he doesn't like that yellow light, which is why he always tends to go black and white. But here's another shot, and I really like this one too. And we're looking down the street. there's a garage in the end, there's lights, but I quite like, there's some little bicycles just sitting in here that are quite dark, and I think I would lighten those up, but I think there's something about that. And then there's this one where we're looking down a street, got the street lights going here. Again, it's empty nighttime streets, except I suddenly noticed over here, there's in fact actually a woman here climbing in or out, or chatting to somebody who's in a truck or van or something like that. But there's something going on, which I thought was interesting, but although it's less noticeable in the whole picture. Here's another one he sent from the same, again, looking down the street, got that length of the street shooting down it. We've got a couple of signs here, watch out for people crossing the road, who's got right of way, somebody lighting their farts. I don't think that's an official sign. But the point is that this really started me thinking. There's something about Anton's photos. And Anton, over the last few months, Anton has sent in several photos for critique and feedback. And it's very, very common for him to send these nighttime photos of empty streets. And it started me thinking about the aesthetic. One of the things that we've constantly kind of been up against with Anton's photos. So Anton, I know you're not watching this live, but you will be watching it back on the recording. So when you're watching this, here, I'm talking to you straight. The thing is about the photos is what I've started to realise, an accumulation of the ones that you've sent in, and especially getting this kind of batch, is that there is an aesthetic you are chasing. There is a particular aesthetic that is really kind of, I can feel you start, and it's that night. And if you are working night shifts, which you quite often do, or certainly work late into the night, and you're walking home, there's that nighttime empty street. And again, you're not living in some busy metropolis or anything like this. This is small town Sweden. And after a certain point in the evening, there just isn't any traffic on the road, apart from the very, very rare. And when I think about that, walking around at night on silent streets, nobody else about, and especially when there's mist and there's a kind of, and there's a sort of quality to the sound or lack of sound. It's a very particular kind of mood, almost a smell, almost a taste, a feel, an aesthetic. And I've realised that a lot of the photos you've sent in the past, and I've gone, well, where's the story? And I've been trying to find something to latch on to for the story, because the photo has been of an empty street, and I've kind of felt, well, it's an empty street. It's empty. There isn't really anything in it for my eye to go to. And that still continues to be the case with some of these photos that you've sent as well. That was still kind of lacking something. But what I've suddenly kind of caught on to is the notion of this aesthetic. So I kind of feel like a little light bulb went on in my head, and I thought, well, okay, let's lean into this. That you're going for the black and white. That's part of your aesthetic. The empty streets, the nighttime, the fact that you might, it's quiet apart from perhaps you suddenly hear a dog barking in the background and then it goes quiet for a while. That once in an hour, a car drives past. Now, what is it about that aesthetic? What is it about that aesthetic that we can then, once you understand that, enhance it? Okay, because now we understand the aesthetic you're chasing. What can we do? It helps us to say, well, what can we put in place to make it more effective, to be able to communicate that aesthetic? Because just like I was saying to Roland, and even more so as I was saying to Gunilla, when you're out on that street, you are feeling it. You are there, nighttime, empty streets. You're there with the camera, you're trying to capture that, but nobody else is. Nobody else who's looking at your photos is there. So how do you communicate that? And part of that then is, what are those feelings? And part of those feelings are also that sort of sense of isolation, but it's also a sense of being the outsider inside these houses People are getting on with their lives. They may be watching the television. They may be making themselves a meal. They may be getting ready for bed, depending on what time you're out on that street. Lives are going on in these houses, and you're outside it. And that's one of those things that I think has always struck me when I've sort of been walked through a town and empty streets at night, is this feeling of being outside. Almost like, now you're not going to go peering into people's windows because that's going to be creepy and it'll get you arrested. But like that kind of thing, notice it again, Christmas festivities. You're walking down the street and you can see Christmas trees in people's windows, and it gives you this sense that there's other lives going on. But you're not a part of those lives. You are an outsider noticing that there's these lives going on. And that's a very particular mood, the mood of that sitting outside of it. And there's a melancholy with that, or there can be a melancholy with that. So this sort of aesthetic of a nighttime stillness. And so within that, things like fog are really good. The fog mist really kind of ramp that up a little bit. But what we also want to do is we're looking to try and create, the photos still need to work in and of themselves. Much like we talked about Gunilla, it's not just enough to go, okay, that reminds me of being there. The photos have to work. Now, some of these photos that you've got have got the leading lines. When you're looking down that street and you've got the rows of lights disappearing into the distance, you've got the paving, you've got the curbside taking us down there, then these are all good things. They kind of create a sense of something. But the problem is with the leading lines, is the leading lines kind of need to lead to something. Because if you have leading lines going to a blank space, an empty space, it just feels unfulfilling again. A little bit like when we looked at Gunilla's choir, they're all looking over at something. We can't see what it is they're looking at. So it just doesn't kind of feel, but they're not even looking with a sort of sense of suspense. We're just kind of glancing over. We follow their gaze, but we're not following it to anything. So it feels unfulfilled. And when you create strong, powerful leading lines in a photo, but it doesn't deliver, then it just feels kind of slightly disappointing. So one of the things we need to think about is, given that there are no people in, well, unless it's accidentally like the woman standing by the side of the van, is there's the narrative, is the unseen narrative. Okay, really, here's your line, the unseen narrative. The unseen narrative is the implied narrative. Okay, so the implication, what we're trying to do is put across that implication that you are on the outside and that there are other things going on, that there are lives going on, and we're just seeing part of that, or we're implying part of it. Now, if we flick back to, this one where, there's somebody in the street, that's great, except for the fact that you need to make more of a feature of it. You're kind of far away on it. This one, again, there's signs, but we're not really, everything draws us to this sign, but the sign in itself isn't fulfilling enough as something to look at. This one has a particular, I'd like it. We've got leading lines, although it does just kind of go to the side of a house here. But like I say, if we come back to the notion of these bicycles, the bicycles imply it's nighttime, but these are children's bikes. And the children's bicycles really feel like that's the implied narrative. So when we look at this street scene, we've got the bicycles. And then what we also have is a bit of a light in a window. Now, here, I think, is where we start to move on to something. So when you are going for the implied unseen narrative, you need to have the clues, and the clues can be the abandoned bicycle on a lawn. They can be the light in the window. So maybe it's a dark street, but there's a little streak of light coming out, or you get the feeling that there's a television on, or that the people are sort of getting ready for bed, or that there's a notion that there are other people about. They're just out of shot, and that sense then really enhances that sense that you are outside of it. You are in this dark street, and there are all these other lives going on. When I talk about the notion of cinematic photography, I always talk about there's action, there's anticipation of action, and there's reaction to action. And in a way, the unseen narrative is the anticipation. The place is empty, but we're kind of almost waiting for something to happen. And you get a better sense of waiting for something if there are these little clues. So to come back then to how can you ramp up this aesthetic? Now, one of the other things that you have as a restriction, you've mentioned to me, is you're using a 50mm lens. You just have the 50mm lens on the camera. You're planning on getting more lenses and what have you, but that's the one that kind of is sitting there at the moment. Now, the problem with the 50mm lens is it is pretty much the focal length of our own eyes. So it is how we see the world. Now, if we're just taking photos of things to say that's what it looked like, then actually a 50mm lens is quite good. But there is this notion of we don't take photos to record what something looks like. We take photos to see what something looks like as a photo. That we're using photography as a storytelling medium. And at that point, actually the 50mm almost plays against us. If we're zoomed in, it's showing us a world in a way that we wouldn't normally see it. If we're wide angle and we're stepped back, we see a world in a way that we don't usually see it. And these things then become much more storytelling devices. Now, sometimes you can play with that with the crop as well. When I talk about doing the cinematic crop sets us in a mood for, oh, right, this is like watching something on telly. This is like watching something at the movies. It starts to trigger a notion of narrative absorption. This idea of getting into storytelling mode. Like the minute somebody says once upon a time, we go, okay, now I'm getting ready for the story. So when you have a cinematic crop, that kind of does it for you. Similarly, actually, sometimes the certain kind of portrait shots, crops as well, they can also set us up that in a slightly different way, almost like in a book, where you've got your book where your pictures are like this. Because again, we naturally see in a landscape format. We don't look at things in a portrait format. So what am I starting to say? That if we start pulling all these things together, if you really want to take this narrative of nighttime, empty street, that kind of mood aesthetic, then now what you want to do is start looking for the tools that are going to enhance that. Part of that might be the lens you use or the way that you crop the image. With a prime, because it's a fixed prime lens as well, which means if you want to get closer, you're going to have to walk and get closer. If you want to stand back, stand further back. But think about the crop. Think about how you're doing it. So that perspective point is going to become really important. You also need to things like the leading lines going down the street work particularly well. So think about your shapes and your leading lines. All your compositional tools are going to become really important. Mist is great. Another thing you can do in terms of perspective is if you can get out on a wet, if you're out on a wet night, there's puddles, right? Puddles are great for reflections, and also change your angle. Get down to ground level, shoot into the puddle, look at the building with a little bit of reflection, maybe slightly, where there's a little bit of ripple on it. Or you're getting a shot with a bit of a building or a bike or a car or street lights with the reflection in the puddle as well. So wet streets are really good for bouncing that light about, especially when you're in limited light. So your weather can become a really important part of it as well. You're looking for these kind of cinematic approach. Even if you're not doing a cinematic crop, you're still looking at this kind of cinematic approach of how you're going to do this. So play with angles. Don't do everything from eye height. Like I say, get down to ground level. Move the camera around and try different things, because that's going to, again, emphasize the sense of difference, of not looking at it as just as through an everyday kind of lens. Now, one of the last things I would mention on that is to look up, I would say go and take a look at a guy called Todd Hido. Todd, Todd, Hido, Hido. Okay, so now he's not doing exactly what you're doing. He's not got that same aesthetic, but he's an American photographer. But there is an aesthetic where he's coming from. He's got a whole bunch of work. He's got a whole portfolio of work, which is essentially outside, quite often nighttime photography. And that sense of alienation, that sense of the unseen narrative, is something that he's really developed strongly. And a lot of what he does has that effect of the single light coming from the window in the house, taken from outside on the street. Or maybe there's a single car, the rest of the street is empty, but there's a single car with its headlights on, or there's a single car with somebody climbing in or out or something like that. But what it does is it emphasizes this sense that there's this world and we are just sort of moving through it, and we're not a part of the worlds that are going on around us. We are the outside observer, not being observed. We are unseen. And there are all these unseen narratives. There are these implied narratives. And I think, so everything that you've sort of sent me, and these photos get included in that, have led me to understand that really, I think, is the narrative that you are chasing. But hopefully, by explaining it in this way, it triggers something. Switches on a couple of light bulb moments. And I think next time you're out there, have this idea in mind. Like I say, go and look up Todd Hido, but also just take this idea of what angles do I want to go for? What unseen narratives can I create? Where is there a light coming from a window? Where is there a car in the distance? Where is there somebody out walking their dog? What's the focal point? What's the bit that's going to emphasize the idea that I am the outsider, just sort of sitting almost ghost-like, observing what's going on in an otherwise empty street? Okay, so I hope that makes sense, Anton. A lot of interest. I mean, yeah, again, I could crop around and play with a couple of photos, try and tidy them up a bit, but I don't think that's really what's going on here. I think it's much more about this notion of what your aesthetic is, and then using these different tools in order to enhance that narrative and that aesthetic that you're then presenting out to other people. So thanks very much for sending these along, Anton, and for your questions and everything else, because I think it's really got me to sort of stop and think about that notion of that aesthetic. Once you can identify what it is you're really trying to capture, it makes it much easier to then find the tools you need in order to be able to express it. Right, okay. Full on philosophical there. So where are we? So yeah, Marilyn had been saying nice food, moody atmosphere, and Sandra said very atmospheric. VG says hedgehog, did you say? Question mark. Yes, a hedgehog is a small mammal with lots of spikes on it, prickly thing. Sandy says perfect horror movie scene, just waiting for somebody to jump out of the shadows, which again is part of the unseen narrative. With the darkness, you don't fully know what's sitting in the dark. April says really like the fog in the pictures. Sandy says Sandra says nice set of photos. VG says moody, dark, very mysterious and interesting. And Sandy says you can really feel the isolation. And Gunilla says, is it Todd Hido? Yes, it is exactly that. TODDHIDO. So, after the podcast, type that into Google Images, go find the bits and pieces. He's got other kind of work, but he does have a body of work which is specifically about that sort of sense of isolation. But there is a very American perspective on it. When you look at it, you'll recognise him instantly, that kind of Americanized kind of melancholic stillness. But there's an aesthetic that comes out of Hopper, which has been explored by people like Gregory Hewson and what have you. Although these people generally have people in it just standing there looking moody. What makes Todd Hido's interesting is that he's creating the same kind of aesthetic but without the people in it. But I think it's certainly something worth taking a look at. April says I will look it up as well. Yeah, excellent. Stacey says, what kind of lens would you use instead? What kind of lens would I use instead? I mean, I think if you play around with a wide angle lens, you can get distortion at the edges, and that notion of distortion can emphasize that sense of otherworldliness. But then sometimes that can also move you into the horror genre if you're not too careful. Zoom lenses allow you to get into places that you can't. I mean, a lot of it really is, I suppose maybe it's less about the lens and it's more about how you're using it. Like I say, I think more about your perspective, get lower, move higher, have other objects line things up. The 50mm sometimes doesn't allow you to get as much of the street in. It will kind of be slightly restrictive. You've got to stand slightly further back to get the larger scene. But also doesn't allow you to zoom in on detail. You've got to walk much closer to it. But it's, to be honest, you just play around and you find what's a comfortable fit for you. If you go out with a particular lens and it's not doing it for you, swap it over, use a different lens, and you keep doing that until you start going, oh yeah, now I feel like I'm getting what I want out of it. But yeah, I mean, you can get by with the 50mm. Okay, right. So thank you, Anton, for sending that in. And so thank you earlier also to Gunilla and to Roland for sending in their photos. So very little actual editing going on in this feedback session. But at the same time, lots of philosophy, lots of ideas about what are we actually doing with our photography. So I'm kind of finding that interesting. It appeals to me. I hope it's kind of appealed to you. So what have we got coming up then? So next week is going to be the car photo challenge. Okay, so last week I did a whole bunch of stuff on how to photograph cars. And so if you want to go and check out episode 301, if you missed it, or you're just looking for a bit of remind yourself of some fresh inspiration, go and take a look at that. So the car photo challenge set by Robert, because he won the most smug points the previous month. And once you've got the images in, send them to kimairspodcast@gmail.com. Try to get them to me by Friday. So next week, today's the 23rd. Next week will be the 30th. So Friday the 28th, try and get your images to me by then. Saturday morning at the absolute latest. Please remember that I have to put all these podcasts together and assemble everything and put them in all in order and work out the narrative arc and all the rest of it. It takes me time to do. So if you send me something on Saturday evening, or even worse, Sunday morning, it's a bit of a squeeze to try and fit it in. There's no guarantee I'll be able to. So try and do that. If you haven't done so already, please click the like down here somewhere, and it helps the algorithms always. If you find any of another thing to remind you, if you find any of these snippets interesting and you think, actually, I know somebody else, whether it's a friend, a camera club person, somebody else playing around with photography, point them to these podcasts, or point them to a section of the podcast, even if it's just something where you go, oh, you know what, we were talking about what it's like doing this. Kim was talking about that on the podcast. You should take a look at that. Not necessarily that they're going to come and become a regular and join in the podcast, but to understand that we have over 300 podcasts now is a massive resource here for anybody else that you know. And it's sitting there free just to be tapped into. So, yeah, spread the word, pass it around, and point people in the direction. Right. I think that's it. So yes, next week, car photo challenge. Then, depending on the results of the car photo challenge, that will make, we will then figure out who's accumulated the most smug points, and they get to choose the topic for September. At the moment, I have no idea what that will be. So if you want to have a chance at that, make sure you get a good car photo in for next week, because smug points are plenty to be won. You get 10 smug points just for sticking your photo in. And then there's a crowd vote where you get a bonus 20 smug points. Of course, if you turn up live and you leave a comment, you get another 5 smug points. And then there's my own preference of first, second, third for bonus 30, 20 and 10 smug points as well. So plenty of smug points to be won. And then the winner gets to choose the topic for September. Right, okay. Yes, the first one into September will be another feedback session. So if you have questions, you have a particular photo or anything like that you want feedback on, then again, send it to kimairspodcast@gmail.com. That's us. Thank you once again to everybody turning up and leaving comments, and to Gunilla, Anton and Roland for sending in the photos. I look forward to see you all next week. Take care. Bye-bye.